Our second DVD video on murals deals with a survey of early South Indian styles that evolved from the Ajanta style during the Pallava, Chola, and Vijayanagara period of rule. No matter what rulers were in power in different regions, the art styles were similar, differing mainly in expression and sizes of figures, all evolved from the Ajanta style. So first, the Pallava period and style. About the same time as the Ajanta, Patalkora, Bog, Badami, and Ellora caves were embellished, similar mural painting was flourishing in South Indian caves and temples too. There are 4 places with Pallava murals, and we'll start with Panamalai and Kanchipuram. Pallavan kings in Tamil country took over much of Karnataka's Chalukyan territory, where Badami is. Panamalai, in the late 600s, the Kathalagiri Ishvara temple was built by Rajasimha, meaning a lion among kings. There are few images left in the temple due to the ravages of time. This is Shiva in his great dance, Nataraja. Almost impossible to make out, except a sculpture of him is opposite the painting, and we can see a shoulder and one of his arms crossing in front of him in both. But in the painting, his head is gone. The best, however, is this Devi, or goddess, watching Shiva dance and holding an umbrella. Pretty fancy umbrella. Dry fresco technique was here too. Most paint has peeled off the stone walls. Delicate features and the expression on her are even superior to Ajanta in a way. Notice her legs. Interesting floral decoration on her leggings. This single remaining painting is pretty well eroded, but has a very similar tilt of the head as Parvati does at Badami. The right image is redrawn for clarity. Quite nice linear detailing, a bit more ethereal perhaps than the Ajanta style. And then a Kanchipuram, Pallava period and style. It has many temples and sub-temples. The Kailasanatha temple is a Shiva temple and a unique example of Dravidian style of architecture. It is the oldest structure here and the successor of the rock temples at Mahabalipuram, and was built mostly with sandstone. It's regarded mainly as an architectural wonder, so currently the Archaeological Survey of India maintains it. Many of the cells around the temple had paintings in them, but only 6 still show what remains of them. These are the centuries that Tamil poetry and music flourished. Hard to make out. It's the head of Shiva, large, strong shoulders. No longer was a black outline used, as at Ajanta. Thick brown ones here, but all very curving too. Here's a computer version. We can see that he is seated, formal, frontal. Epic poems, Tamil, were written down too, and they mention such temple paintings. Another Shiva head. We can see the brown outlines better here. They seem to have stayed better than the colors filling in the lines. A little better preserved in a way, Shiva Nataraja in action, dancing. A different feel from Ajanta. Dry fresco technique of lime plaster put over stone walls was used here. Other figures of Shiva with a high crown. Interesting greens in the background. More contrast by a computer. The damage through the years was because of salt action, abrasion from sweeping, incense from rituals, and moss created by dust and humidity. Redrawn here. Still tilting heads. And a lovely lady here, likely Parvati. And recolored here. So different details emerge. Notice the face on the lower left. Next we go to Sittannavasal in Tamil Nadu, near Trichy. The murals here are in a Jain cave temple high up overlooking a lake. Sittannavasal caves have the earliest surviving Jain murals anywhere to be found, Pallava Style. Sittannavasal, further south in Tamil Nadu, the rulers here were Pandyas during the 800s, and they commissioned painting inside the cave temple on stone pillars and on walls. This was a period when Jainism flourished in South India. Inside, in the darkness, we can sort of make out a Jain saint standing in a typically nude and austere pose. In the ceiling of the porch, some art is similar to Ajanta, but just decorative. Pandya rule, but Pallava art style following Ajanta. But this style did not become the traditional Jain style later on, which we will see. We notice the ceiling and the pillar further away. On part of the ceiling are patterns of stylized lotuses and floral creepers, and lotus seed pods. They were done in natural colors and curving lines, similar to Ajanta in a way. On the pillar, likely Jain saints. Much of the art has fallen off. Sittannavasal was a center of Jain monks from the 2nd century on. And here with different lighting. The painted plaster was made of 3 layers: rough plaster, fine plaster, and then dried, then a covering layer of paint, as at Ajanta. On another pillar, in the center, a female dancer adorned with ornaments and a distinctive hairstyle, but rather hard to make out. Likely the full body was shown originally with elaborate clothes below her waist. Another dancer, a bit more clear here. They closely resemble the bare-breasted celestial maidens, the apsaras, in the classical style of the upper classes as at Ajanta. She is adorned with a variety of flowers and wears necklaces around her neck. These 2 apsaras greet people when first entering the cave. Lotus seed pods on another part of the ceiling. The pods drawn in quantity can give a sense of space in a way. Divine lotuses emerge from the mud below the water, and they blossom above, leaving real seed pods here in a pond of lotus leaves. The most important mural of Sittannavasal is further inside and on a ceiling. It's an amazing composition of a Jain heaven, one that accepted all people equally, new converts from Buddhism and Hinduism especially. It depicts a divine lotus tank, a pond with 3 fortunate souls who have plunged in, ready to receive their final divine discourse. It's 2 + 1 inside the blue lines. According to Jain faith, those souls who have faith in their final liberation have to pass through 7 stages, and one of those stages is the region of the tank, meaning the temple pond. In a modern drawing, 2 figures are at the top here, collecting lotus flowers larger than their heads even, and ducks and geese, fish, an elephant at the right also collecting lotuses, a cow down below. At this assembly, different beings, animals, humans, and gods, are also present to behold the divine discourses. The flowers are in various stages of development, from a bud to a well-blown-out flower, and they seem more important than the lotus gatherers, actually. The lower figure is bending over to get a lotus bud soon to blossom out, and he's placing flowers into a basket, highlighted here. This is likely the way the original looked. Notice the cow. The lotus gatherers have a lilting sort of grace, like the stalks of the lotuses gathered, all painted with a great sense of tenderness and beauty, delicate, lyrical, a gracious world. At the far right of the painting, another lotus gatherer has collected a bundle of lotuses. Again, it's a youthfully portrayed culture. No old, bearded sages. These 3 men possibly show Jain monks getting flowers for offerings to their teachers. Smiles on their faces suggest that they are happy and content. Intimate and poetic in a way, ready for their final liberation. Sittannavasal means the abode of great saints, Jain saints. The composition treats all life forms alike and worthy, overriding the differences that may exist. It is a celebration of life, even in afterlife. And redrawn for clarity here. This might be one of the most beautiful depictions of flowers in ancient Indian art, according to some art critics. These are likely the earliest murals known in the very south of India. It's really too bad so much of this composition is lost. Lotus flowers, fishes, birds, and animals, and people. A rather heavenly vision. This art is regarded as a surviving link between the Ajanta paintings of the 500s and the Chola paintings of Tanjavur, which comes next. The Chola period and style. From the deep southeast around Tanjavur, the Chola kingdom began expanding. Raja I conquered the Pandyan lands north to the Chalukyan territory into Karnataka and west over to Kerala. This shows the extent of the empire when he died, even most of Sri Lanka to the south. Tanjavur in Tamil Nadu. Raja Chola built 52 temples in all, and the most splendid one is the Brihadiswara Shiva temple in Tanjavur, just next to his palace, of course. The main tower is 61 meters high, 200 feet. In the entry porch are many much later murals, well protected behind a row of Shiva lingams. This later art is of the Nayaka era and was done in the 16th and 17th century. We'll deal with the Nayakas later on. The Chola art was discovered in a narrow and dark passage around the temple's sanctum sanctorum with no ventilation. Top images. There are 7 sets of high painted panels, and all on only one side of the central Shiva lingam, painted while the temple construction was still going on and a bit after. Possibly more were planned, but were never done. Each panel is 4.5 meters tall by 3 meters wide, about 15 by 10 feet. These are the most Chola murals anywhere, dating mainly from 1010 to the 1200s. Mostly we are seeing preserved fragments of the best of the panels. And notice, this is the first time we are seeing older men with beards. It comes in with Hinduism, not Buddhism or Jainism. Most images are Shaivite, relating to Shiva. Sundarar, at the left, was a great Tamil saint. The paintings were done in the usual wet fresco technique, mineral colors on thin, wet lime plaster over stone walls, so the colors form part of the lime plaster. They are integrated together. True fresco here. Fresco buono. Good fresco. They are more durable than the dry plaster murals, but their execution is very difficult, because they must be done rather quickly before the plaster dries, and it looks like perhaps a rishi, a Hindu sage. But most of these paintings had been damaged because of incense and soot from lamps over the centuries and do require restoration. A Himalayan forest scene where a cobra snake has appeared, disturbing everyone. This shows more of one panel, Shiva Tirupparutikanram. And here restored. Tirupparutikanram, destroyer of the 3 cities of the demons, with 8 arms and magical weapons. Even the consort of a demon is drawn with sympathy, showing tenderness and intimacy in a way, Ajanta-like. The Nataraja panel, before preservation. Shiva dances in front of a thatched hut, but the Chola paintings do not flow from wall to wall like in Ajanta. They all have lines or borders framing them, an evolution of sorts. And here, after restoration, Shiva with 6 arms and a beatific smile, the world dancer. The idea was to fill up all space on ceilings and walls for maximum religious impact. Nearby this Shiva is Raja Chola himself, standing behind his guru, Karuvarar, supposedly. The first time we are seeing a bearded wise guru. This then is the earliest royal portrait in all of Indian painting, done about 1010. The figures were drawn in curving, bold outlines of light red, very sweet expressions. Mostly they were modeled in various combinations of pink, white, and black, with a few other colors, all done quickly on damp lime plaster. Chola compositions are more complex than Pallava art, and greater attention to detail was usually paid. The temple always served as a platform for dancers who excelled in the traditional dance Bharatanatyam. So above Sundarar and his elephant to the right is a line of temple dancers. Celestial musicians and temple dancers with offerings on their heads. The coloring modeling is kept slow and smooth and extraordinary in its expressiveness. An exceptional dancing girl of the Brihadiswara temple of Tanjavur. A Bharatanatyam dance pose, well modeled, expressive with very lyrical lines. The Chola art period with true frescoes. Now visitors are not allowed into the small chambers to see the murals, but there is an interpretation center which now displays excellent full-size photographs of the murals. And a book, Chola Murals, was written by top Chola scholar P.S. Sri Raman. So our third major area, Vijayanagara period and style. Vijayanagara kings conquered and ruled some of central and all of South India from the mid-1300s on, having conquered the Hoysala Empire in the Deccan Plateau and the Muslim Sultanate of Madurai in Tamil land. Tirupparutikanram in Tamil Nadu is first, then quite famous Hampi in Karnataka, and finally Anantapur in Andhra, where the Lepakshi temple is. Vijayanagara was the largest South Indian state ever, and the rulers built 500 temples and many murals were painted in them. A unique painting style was developed, and it spread by the travel of pilgrims and artists looking for patrons. The temple of Tirupparutikanram is a Jain temple, but I found no images of its architecture. It does have, however, the earliest Vijayanagara murals that still exist, but there are only a couple fragments at the entrance, nothing inside. Late 1300s. Likely 4 young women can be seen in this broader view, possibly royal ladies or dancers. The small one at the left holds a mirror. It's rather simple, fluid, expressive, curving lines, quite lovely. A few strong colors remain. Some Jain deities here with high crowns, one pouring a liquid on a statue probably for a ritual, and Airavat, the magical white elephant. We see black outlines again, with faces getting duplicated, stylized, likely a different artist. There is some similarity here to the murals in the Pallava temple at Kanchipuram, and even to those in the Kailasa rock-cut temple at Ellora, but mostly in line and coloring. Hampi. Hampi was once the capital of the mighty Vijayanagara Empire, built up in the 1300s. But it's a fantasy town today, called the City of Ruins. It was largely destroyed in the mid-1500s by Muslim armies. The natural beauty all around is very powerful, with the Tungabhadra River flowing through the valley. It had been one of the richest cities in the world in its day. The tall Gopuram in the distance is a 9-tiered gateway of the Shiva Veerabhadra temple. It's almost 48 meters high, 160 feet. Most of the paintings done centuries later are on a long ceiling inside the temple, almost 5 meters in width by close to 10 in length, that is 16 by 32 feet. Rather impossible to photograph as one picture. Stories portrayed here are from the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and especially the Shiva Purana. Mural painting became prominent during Vijayanagara rule. Very formal and stylized, however. A very linear style, with figures framed in vertical and horizontal panels, and shown mainly in profile, except for the gods, of course. These are called protective divinities, but actually they are the last 5 avatars of Vishnu, ending with Kalki, the white horse, at the right, and more of them to the left. Rama and Sita, with just a touch of landscape here, with a very abstracted tree. Amazing use of some light blue, mostly in clothing. And here recolored, blue in the tree. Their grand marriage with his brothers and her sisters, very formal again, simplicity, but with a bit of lyricism of line and expression, and colors are mostly pastel. In another framed compartment, we see an archery contest held by many royal suitors to win the hand of Draupadi in marriage, to shoot a revolving fish image up above by looking down at it mirrored in a pool of water below. Many noble warriors fail. When Prince Arjuna comes along, he succeeds to bring down the fish, to everyone's amazement. Royalty with crowns watch him from their own compartments. Never does any action flow over. Rigid, formal, Vijayanagara, far from Ajanta art. The story of this empire and its kings is deeply intertwined with the stories of their gods. Here the revered guru of the early empire, Vidyaranya, goes in procession seated in a palanquin, poorly preserved, but the way it looks in my photo. And here recolored. It's the second time, chronologically, that we see a wise sage in mural art. But as this is a Shiva temple, the marriage of Shiva and Parvati is important. He's about to take her hands. Formal poses with ceremonial attire, perhaps befitting the highest temple in the capital of a formal empire. The backgrounds were usually painted red, with the figures of lighter tones. The dry secco technique here was used, where the surface was prepared with 3 or 4 layers of plasters, and finally with a crystal soft lime plaster, and in some places the paste of conch shells. Sketches were then made in dark red ochre or black outlines on the smooth dry surfaces. Then only 3 or 4 colors of paint were often soft and smoky, mostly earthen tones and sometimes mixed with glue. The paintings of Hampi then reflect the dynamic spirit and the ideals of the Vijayanagara Empire, including compartmentalization and use of borders, influences from Jain art, outlines and defined spaces and sizes. Any sense of movement is mostly in the flowers and in the trees. To finish up with Hampi now, in another area in the ceiling, in the top circle here of my photo, a very austere Shiva is shown in his naked forest form self with an abstract tree behind him, as Dakshinamurti, rather caricatured. 2 ladies dancing next to him cannot arouse him from his austerities, which turned out to be a big problem. 4 important Vijayanagara warrior kings are down below, all space filled in. In another image nearby, the god of love, Manmat, is in his chariot with a magic weapon, an arrow needed to interrupt Shiva's deep meditation in the Himalayan forest, so much like the Roman Eros. He was sent by other gods to get Shiva, Dakshinamurti, aroused enough to sire a son with Parvati, to save them all from certain demons, of course. Well, it must have worked, as Shiva eventually had 2 sons. Rather nice movement in springtime. Down below we see birds, animals, and fish. Love should be in the air here. There is usually a simplicity and sometimes a vigor in the paintings, and a sense of movement and energy, rather good for storytelling. All murals preserved in the ceiling of the Virupaksha temple. At least 2 books I found were published just on Hampi. Although the capital Hampi was ruined, the Vijayanagara Empire did survive for another century. Now we come to the town of Anandpur in Andhra Pradesh and the temple at Lepakshi. This is the last of the Vijayanagara murals and considered the best of the art style. This is one entrance to the Veerabhadra Shiva temple, built 1533 to 38. It's the Archaeological Survey of India that looks after the temple since many years. The main gateways leading into the inner temple, like this, and many special halls have murals on the high ceilings inside. Following the collapse of Hampi, Lepakshi became a center of trade and pilgrimage within the Vijayanagara Empire. It was built by the imperial treasurer of the emperor and his brother, an army general. Like at Hampi, borders frame the paintings on the ceilings, following the architecture supporting it, of course, but there is good movement within the very large frames. Some ceilings are up to 7 meters long and 4 wide, about 23 by 13 feet. These are some of the largest murals painted in Asia. Borders also mean Jain influence. Not from Jain murals, but from Jain miniature paintings. Very important difference there. Artists knew and influenced each other, no matter what religion. The ceiling art is divided into strips, which are subdivided again into square or rectangular panels. It's considered to be some of the finest mural painting in the medieval period in India. And most have been restored somewhat recently, as this was, although a few have not, like this. And now for some details in restored areas. Like at Sittannavasal and at Hampi, the murals are always above the columns. This is in the dancing hall, the Kalyana Mandapa, and this is the way I saw them, my photo. That is Shiva standing. Shiva blesses his devotees and restores life to a king's son, and to a little calf too, down below. We notice Shiva's protruding eye. As usual, the scenes are from the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and the Puranas, and include the 10 incarnations of Vishnu and the 14 avatars of Shiva. Lepakshi art presents the richness and color of a great cosmopolitan society. This 4-headed Brahma and Vishnu are well restored too, here watching Parvati and Shiva's wedding. The slightly protruding eye again. A major feature in Jain manuscript art, miniatures, here for the first time in murals. A great devotee of Shiva at the right is asking him for Atma Linga, a symbol of divine consciousness. Shiva wears a tiger skin here, and with 4 arms he gives blessings and protection while also holding his magical weapons. A royal bhakta sits as a yogi, richly ornamented and crowned. Great detailing here. Exceptional fabrics too, styles that are still in vogue in Andhra Pradesh. The paint was put over a plaster layer of lime mortar. The colors were made with both vegetable and mineral pigments of yellow, ochre, black, blue, and green, blended with lime water. The backgrounds are generally painted in red. Not much is left of Shiva here except fabrics. Shiva is here on the left. The paint on his face has failed. With magic weapons he slays the demon Andakasura down below, while other deities and worshippers look on in amazement. All arranged in rows, and an abundance of beards and mustaches. Here only 1/2 of this has been restored. Women are assembled to greet Parvati after her marriage. They each have distinct hairstyles, dresses, facial types, and various skin colors as well. Buns are still common in the south. Quite a variety of floral borders here too. A sense of liveliness is conveyed by angular features and by the peaked corners of clothes. And what fabrics! Rows of people looking in one direction is also very Jain in style. There are many eyes sticking out here. This protruding eye effect may have come from Gujarati Jain merchants or Gujarati artists migrating here to Andhra. Quite some ornamentation. Clothing and ornaments indicate strong formality. Many, all in a row. Two brothers, Veerapana and Virana, were the architects of Lepakshi, regally dressed and crowned with headgear. Veerapana was the treasurer of Vijayanagara, and he put royal tax money into the building. Virana was a general, and he donated the land. We see the curious stance of some of the people, not standing straight up, it would seem, but maybe okay from the artist's point of view, while painting on the ceiling. In another view, they have high hats as aristocrats and wear very fancy clothes. And here each holds up one arm to receive prasad, offering, so they're in a state of reverential prayer, getting food blessed by the deity. The two on the left were probably younger brothers. Two on the left here wear simple turbans, maybe the main builders. Usually the conical and patterned brocaded headgear went with nobility or royalty. Such an amazing emphasis on the period costumes. The most lively and complicated scene at Lepakshi, and our last one, shows a huge ferocious boar racing through the forest. Actually, it was said to be Parvati in disguise. It's a long panel that narrates a hunting episode from the Mahabharata called the Kirat Arjunia. Visually, the story is seen all at once, of course. Animals above the boar flee away from it. Antelopes, rabbits, and birds. This is before restoration here. And here as well. Finally, some landscape scenery begins to emerge in South Indian art. This is for the first time, landscape. The Pandya clan, led by Prince Arjuna, had been exiled into the forest by the Kaurava clan for 12 years, but they were now ready to return to defeat them. To illustrate the story best, these next images are details in the long mural. Arjuna performed tapasya, penance, to win a magical weapon from Shiva in order to destroy the Kauravas. But Shiva and Parvati were actually watching him, and they decided to test Arjuna. So Parvati became the great boar, here coming in from the right, and it terrorized the elders. As it tore through the forest, they experienced total confusion, fleeing and some falling down. A great sense of movement, helped by the amazing fabrics and ornamental margins, and the mastery of facial expression is quite unique. Arjuna, along with his friends and their bows, easily shot the animal with an arrow, but Shiva came on the scene as a simple hunter, a Kirata. So this is Shiva who challenged Arjuna, claiming also to have killed the boar as a kind of test. This is another not yet restored detail. 8-armed Shiva with his crown is the Kirata, the hunter. Dressed in elegant fabrics, Arjuna and Shiva argued and decided to fight. Just as Arjuna, on the right with his bow, raised his hand to strike the mere hunter, Shiva rose out of the rocky earth from below, appearing in one of his true forms. Notice the white creepers curling up the tree. Finally, Shiva here, dark and 4-armed, shows Arjuna his magical weapons. Arjuna first stands with hand raised above his head, and then prostrates himself down below before the great god. Parvati was not really the boar, of course, and Shiva granted Arjuna a great weapon, which he later used to defeat the Kauravas, and he regained power for the Pandyas. This is the most dynamic panel at Lepakshi, Kirat Arjunia, epic in scale. A good feeling of space with remarkable perspectives. Classical Indian naturalism has its last word here at Lepakshi's Veerabhadra Shiva temple. Such naturalism doesn't happen much again. Dignity, formality, elegance in mural art, they rather befit the major political power of the Vijayanagara Empire. I found only one book just on Lepakshi, but some of its murals are included in George Mitchell's Architecture and Art of Southern India. So, we have seen something of the Pallava, Chola, and Vijayanagara periods and their styles. These three main styles evolved from that of Ajanta, of course, with its expression of movement, its flowing images, and even with an inward spiritual feeling. Then more linear styles came, and more figures were done in profile, showing both royalty and ordinary folk, even old men with beards, and some sages and gurus. Conventionality became more the norm, with most of the available space filled in. Ceilings too. Lots of framing and borders, with images compartmentalized. Much is ceremonial and formal, elegant too, up through the last Vijayanagara era, but some landscape art was included. It tended rather to turn downhill or devolved after that, with many variations. At least two important books include most of the different styles that we've been studying in this DVD. Our third survey of murals of India on DVD is a focus on the Nayaka period and the various Nayaka styles that emerged both in Tamil Nadu and in Karnataka, that is, following the breakup of the Vijayanagara Empire, the Nayaka period. In the first part, we'll look at murals in 4 temples with the Madurai or Madura style in Tamil Nadu, 3 Hindu and 1 Jain, and in a palace, a style which lasted only 70 years. Then we'll focus on Karnataka, where 2 temples, a palace, and a Jain monastery have rather different styles of Nayaka art. At this Jain monastery, I'll read a wonderful description by an ancient king of how the dry fresco murals were prepared and made.